Hello there, and welcome to this video which will detail some of the early game units for Total War 3 Kingdoms. When any new Total War game comes out, there's always a lot to learn, so hopefully with this video I can show you some of the early game units that you'll probably be working with, so you can get to grips with them and save you some disorientation of learning a new Total War. Thanks to CA for the access to 3 Kingdoms, and remember this is pre-release footage, so expect to see bugs and unfinished things, as well as content that may be different in the final version. And remember, these are going to be the early game units I'm showing you, so they're not going to be anything too crazy exciting. I will show you some of the more swanky units at the end of the video, however. So, let us begin. First off, Sabre Militia. They are cheap and not so cheerful frontline infantry. They'll do well fighting other unarmoured infantry, swords, spears, missiles, whoever, and as it says, their role is assault, which means they're more of a damage dealer than anything else, although still a very budget damage dealer overall. They kind of represent an untrained mass of civilians that are all fighting next to each other in no real formation, just swinging swords at the enemy. There is a slightly improved version called Sabre Infantry, who are pretty much the same, just with a little bit more armour and damage output. And then we've got Jiang Sword Guards, and yes, I am going to butcher all the unit names. This unit has the frontline role, which means it's better at holding and surviving and keeping units in place, rather than dealing out loads of damage. Still better units than the Sabre Militia and Infantry, because they have more armour piercing damage and armour themselves. Overall, this is a slightly higher tier unit, so you can come to expect that. And then if you like a good axe like me, Axe Band could be your light infantry of choice. They are low tier like the Sabre Militia, but they are armour piercing more than anything. They've got pretty high armour piercing damage, so a good one to try and wear down those heavy elite troops, but they do not have a lot of armour, so missiles and cav charges will absolutely destroy them. Although they do have a shield, so a little bit of hope at deflecting those missiles. They can perform advanced formations, but not necessarily at the start of a campaign. And then just to show you a bit more of a fun unit which is unique to one particular faction, the hidden axes are pretty sneaky. As you can see, they're all crouched down. You cannot see them now. They are invisible because they are crouched. Shh. They are a dual wielding axe infantry that also has a bow, so they've got the choice of melee or ranged attacks. They also have stalk, so they can't be seen until they're up close, and snipe, so they can fire and remain hidden. Not to mention they'll get vanguard deployment and fear, or scare, and they are pretty high in the armour piercing damage, so you can imagine all the fun you can have with that. Onto some spearman types with the Yi Militia. Now these are anti-large in the way that when they're braced and a cavalry unit charges into them, that cavalry unit will take a lot of damage from charging into spears, so it's not like having a bonus versus large as we've previously known. They do a fair amount of armour piercing damage, but they are the basic of the basic when it comes to spearman type units. And then for something a little bit more advanced, Spear Guards. Same deal, good at taking down cavalry when they're braced, got a few formations when they're a little bit more advanced, but as you can see they've got a pretty big shield, so they can use that to survive missile attacks better and cavalry assaults, so should be able to protect your flanks or hold your front line if need be. And then you've got your Archer Militia. No prizes for guessing what the hell they're going to be doing. They are terrible in melee and fantastic at shooting things. That's pretty much the gist of it. They've got to watch out for pretty much everything, especially cavalry of course, because they will get absolutely destroyed very quickly. They definitely have power in numbers though, especially if they focus fire things down. Particularly those lightly armoured targets of course, unless they've got armour piercing missiles, which these don't, but never mind. Onto some cavalry with mounted Sabre Militia. These boys are designed for chopping down missile units. They've got great missile defense, so they'll be able to get close without getting absolutely blasted to pieces like a lot of other cavalries. And then we've got mounted Lancer Militia. Great for hammer and anviling the back of front lines, or to be honest even the front of front lines, provided they're not braced spear units of course, but they do have to watch out for missile attacks as they have no shield or missile defense, but they've got a nice mix of base and armour piercing damage, so they can be pretty versatile. At least for a cheap unit. And then we've got Raider Cavalry, who are very high in the armour piercing damage, so great for taking on those heavier units. They do have to be very careful of missiles though, as they don't have much armour or a shield to defend from it, so got to keep them out of the way of those. Can be very dangerous if used correctly. So there's a few of your beginner units and what they're all about, and I know, as I say, they're not terribly exciting to look at or anything like that, and I know there's people watching this who are just waiting to hate on 3 Kingdoms for whatever reason, and if you're going to say, oh, the units look boring man, I want some trolls and some dwarfs, well, Well, try having a look at these units. These are Reserve Dragons. They're much like Lothan Seaguard if you're a Warhammer player. They can put spears up front and then missiles behind in one single unit. And as you can see, they are beefcakes to boot. Or how about some Protectors of Heaven? These are anti-large, anti-infantry, anti-everyone. These are heavy glaive infantry, which instantly makes them awesome. These are the equivalent of Phoenix Guard perhaps. Very tough, very powerful, just all-round might. How about the Defenders of Earth? Explosive Arrow Archers. How about that idea? As you can see, the unit size is pretty small for a reason. You think about that for a second. Or lastly, maybe the Jade Dragons, who are essentially Dragon Princes, again for all you Warhammer nerds. A very powerful cavalry capable of dealing with all kinds of enemies, an absolute mobile force to be reckoned with. So that's just a handful of the cooler, more exciting units of Three Kingdoms that you will work your way up to in your campaigns. And all their different abilities and formations is what really makes it interesting to play Three Kingdoms battles. How about some heavy repeater crossbowmen? They definitely have their uses. Or just some regular archers that can use loose formation to help them survive, or maybe get some fire arrows so they can burn people, or the woods, or buildings, whatever the hell they want to burn, they can burn it. It's also nice to see the return of formations for melee infantry. Good old shield wall is back, which is a very powerful way to hold units in place and to buy your army time for special maneuvers. Apart from when one man ruins the whole thing and everyone dies because of him. Or maybe you like a good old cavalry formation, diamonds, wedges, whatever. When you have acquired the necessary skills, you may apply this to some of your cavalries. And of course they have their uses, better charge bonuses, more damage, etc. And tell me it doesn't look cool. Tell me the circle formation doesn't look freaking cool, especially on extreme unit sizes like this is. This is very good if you're being attacked from many angles. Perhaps you could even move an entire army and just sit there this way like you're some kind of weird circle dwarfs. But that's just a handful of the formations and things you can do with some of these units. Like I say, I think this is where the fun of Three Kingdoms battles is. Not just with the units, but back to the old formations and abilities like previous historical totem wars. So there's a glance at some of your new units. This is of course, again, I remind you, pre-release, so expect some of this stuff to change perhaps. But this will hopefully help you get your head around the units when you first jump into Three Kingdoms, and some of the units that you can look forward to later in your campaigns. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the future.